Hello, I'm Joan Manson of Manson Fine Art. Thank you for joining me for my latest tutorial. Today I'll be sharing with you how I created this nocturne scene which occurred during the last full moon. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please click on subscribe and the bell so that you'll be reminded. And if you like this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. I started with Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, a slate gray. It's 9 by 12.5 inches, and I've taped it down to my board using artist tape. Picking out the colors that I need: blue, yellow, blacks and grays, and the green, and the white, of course. It was beautiful. I was so thrilled with the shot that I got. I went out to see the moon. There it was, resting behind the trees, and I took a couple of photos on my cell phone. It was a perfect image. So I'm going to set those up where I can watch them while I'm working. Today I will be using Echo Tools. These are cosmetic brushes, and this is the first time that I've used them. Full set can be gotten for under $15. This is the equivalent of a mop brush, and you could readily use watercolor brushes in this process as well. I have done, and I enjoy them, but I'm not enjoying the way that the pastel is spraying. So I'm going to change my tact, and I'm going to use a sponge applicator. It still has a little white on it, which is blending in, and that's just fine for me. This is a finger applicator. Sorry, this is an oval applicator. I apologize. Just want to fill in the sky completely. I want to make it a nice even blue. Then I'm using the tint to bring in some clouds. For this, I'm using the triangular sponge applicator. I love that applicator. It's great working to create flowers and leaves and wispy clouds. It was an especially cloudy night, and that made it all the more haunting. And I'm just going back and forth using the tint and the blue. And the tint is, of course, the blue with white added to it. Now I'm going to bring in some white, and I am going to use one of the shorter applicators and paint in my moon. This is a Sennelier pastel brush, number 4, I believe. They come in sets of 3. There's a small, a medium, and a large. The small is about a 2, and the large is about a 6. They work beautifully. They have a flat, tilted surface, very thick cluster of bristles, and they work very nicely on sanded paper. Just working back, creating the image of the clouds in the sky. Isn't it amazing? Have you ever noticed when you look at the moon on a cloudy night that it looks as though the moon is in front of the clouds? And that is, of course, because the moon is so bright and it illuminates the clouds in front of it somehow. I've always enjoyed that. Now I pulled up the red. I hadn't pulled it originally and I hadn't thought about it. But I noticed when I was looking at the reference photo, there is a hint of red in the sky and a hint of red in the foliage. So I wanted to include that. Now I didn't see it in the moon, and this is supposed to be a red moon. But I did see it in the reflected light. And it's not that I need to create that much. I don't want it to stand out. I just want there to be a sense of the red. And what's wonderful with the Pan Pastels is that you can really lay color over color over color and build up beautifully. And here we go again with a little more on the right side. I do want to have a balance. This is, of course, done in time lapse, which I'm sure you've noticed. Sometimes my hand can move that quickly, but this isn't normal. Now I'm going to start working with the chromium oxide green. I have the shade, the tint, and the hue. And I'm also going to be working with the black. There's a silhouette in the center part of the image of the trees. Now, in actuality, there's a small pond, and on the other side of that small pond are more shrubs, low trees, and an apartment complex. And behind the apartment complex are more trees. And in the foreground are trees. And you really can't see the water in the position that I was in. So there is no reflection into the pond. But you will be able to see the light of one of the buildings. It'll make it look like there's a single house standing off in the center of the action. Using that same brush, spreading out. And now I'm going to bring in the chromium oxide green. This is the shade. And I'm laying it on top of the black. I want shadow to show through. I want a sort of variegation of the two colors. And I want to create contrast and distance using these colors. Now there is in Pan Pastel a series of extra dark colors where they've added a touch more black. But I find I can do that just fine on my own. It's very convenient to have the tint and the shade and the hue, but you can just as easily purchase only the hues, that's H-U-E-S, the colors, and add black and white to them to create the shades and the tints. There are a lot of options you can take to save money. I believe the full set is over, I think it's over $400. And I have a couple of $100 put into supplies and Pan Pastels, as well as other pastels, and my pastel pencils. But I started out with a set of 20 portrait pastels because I knew that I can get from a portrait collection just about everything I needed for wildlife art. Just bringing up the thin branches at the tops of the trees. And I'm using a eco tool. It's about a 1/2 inch high, flat edge. Allows me to draw down on the edge and draw up into a point. Sometimes when I work, I like to use as few tools as possible, as well as few colors as possible. And other times I just reach for every tool I've got to experiment and every color I have. When I choose a photo that I'm going to use to create a YouTube video or a Skillshare video, I do the preparation. I look at this. I look at my reference photo. I choose the colors I'm going to use. I think about the tools I want to use. And I'll have some extra set aside because I know while I'm working I may see something doesn't work and I'll try a different one. I'm building in the house right now using the white and the black going back and forth, creating light and shadow. But it is possible, and I have done videos on YouTube where you can create everything with red, yellow, blue, black, and white, and do all of your blending from them. Just as you can with watercolor and acrylic paint and oil paint. And it does give you a wonderful controlled palette and its consistency in the work. This is the smallest of the Sennelier brushes I forgot to mention when I switched. Now I'm using the brighter green, the chromium oxide green hue. And I am creating the foreground. So there's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, which is the depth that we need, and which adds to the contrast, or the contrast adds to the depth. And I'm using the yellow ochre now to bring in the shrubbery that was closest to me. And I'm using a larger flat edge cosmetic brush. I've done some pieces, and there are one or two on YouTube where I've painted exclusively with watercolor brushes. That would be the video of Bo with a Cocker Spaniel. And I've done one that I used a different kind of a cosmetic brush. I believe that was with Jingle. I love to experiment. And what I really want, because I try to be a minimalist, is to have a limited palette and a limited number of tools. And sometimes I can pull that off. But sometimes I need the right tool for the right application. And I may use everything I've got. So it all depends upon the project. And Pan Pastels are wonderful in creating soft impressionistic backgrounds. And we bandy about the word impressionistic, talking about the soft style. Um, but Impressionism is more than that. It's about capturing the moment and capturing the emotions and capturing the feelings that the event drew out in the viewer. And I think this piece works up to that. It not only is soft and a bit indistinct, it's also very moody. And it was a haunted view, and I loved it. It was fun to look at the moon, and it was a great pleasure to capture such a good photo of it. And greater still was my joy that I could create this painting. Keeping in mind when you do a landscape, and I don't do a lot of landscapes, but when you do a landscape, you want the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. You need to have sufficient contrast to make the foreground really come forward for you. And complementary and contrasting colors helps to build that as well. It's not just a matter of adding black and white. The green and the blue work so beautifully together because, of course, there is blue in the green. The yellow is a complement to both the green and the blue, as is the red that I put into the sky. And that touch of red with the blue made the vaguest purple, which makes the yellow in the foreground pop out. Just takes a tiny bit. I'm not painting in the Fauvist manner, which is to really put that color out there, to bring out that hard emotional aspect of your work. But I apologize, my camera went off and I dotted in the leaves from the trees above. I have to sharpen my pencils because I'm doing the rest of my work with my Derwent pastel pencils. I have had in the past electric pencil sharpeners, but they burn out. I'm using glycine to cover the piece so I don't smudge it. And now I'm just going to be working in adding dark and light areas and creating the illusion of leaves on a tree. going back and forth with umber and burnt umber, yellow ochre, black, white, gray, just to create the notion of leaves. And I'm doing quick and easy back and forth movements with the pencil. And this bringing back the yellow so I can have some more highlights. There are street lights there as well, so that reflected light is present in the foliage. All that ambient light, it's not all dependent upon the moon, and the stars certainly are not visible on this cloudy night. Now I'm trying to make these leaves appear just a bit closer than the foliage before on the foreground, because these are a little bit closer to me. This is white. Just tapping it with my finger to blur it. I don't want it to be sharp, but I don't want to smear together into a little shade of ochre tint. And I'm adding in some black to create more contrast and distinction between the leaves. And this is a baton applicator that I'm using. These are sold by, when produced by Jane Davenport, who has her own line of pastel palettes. And I have created a couple of pieces using her palettes on YouTube as well. It sounds like I have scores of YouTube videos, and I really don't. But every time I do one, I want to try something new, and I want to share something new, which is what I hope will set me apart from a lot of people. And then, of course, I'll come back and do familiar subjects. But I hope my experimentation will be a draw for you, and you'll enjoy not only watching the technique, but how to use the materials. And give them a try yourself. What doesn't work for me might work beautifully for you, and vice versa. And if you'd like to own this piece yourself, prints of this pastel painting are available on my Fine Art America page, and you can link to that from my website, mansonfineart.xyz. It's imprinted on the owl that you'll see at the beginning and the end of this video. There we go. We have completed the piece. I'm really pleased with it. I love the moodiness. Again, if you like this, please, and want to see more, please click on subscribe and the bell. And if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up.